Q. This segment brought to you by Richard Carr Motors. The Baylor Bear Hotline, Grayson Grundhoefer joins us on recruiting and football and more. Grayson, thank you very much for your time. We know about Baylor being on a recruiting heater, and it's been a nice run. Does that pick up again, or is that something, there's a lull, or what?
I mean, it's definitely going to continue into this weekend. It's a really big one for Baylor, actually. It's a junior day, but it's also a day where they're going to have some 2025 commits on campus, as well as some 2025 prospects to go along with kind of your typical junior day where you have underclassmen and specifically the next class, which is 2026. So they've done a really nice job. I think 11 of the 17 commits will be on campus. A few 2025 prospects that I mentioned, a double-digit number of four-star prospects in the 2026 class will be in Waco as well. So it's a really, kind of big and eventful weekend right before fall camp. They have their last summer camp of the year in the morning, and then in the afternoon they'll have junior day, kind of leading up into nighttime when everybody leaves. So it's another very important weekend. It's one of those weekends that it always is important right before fall camp. It gives you the opportunity to try to build on your future class while also potentially solidifying some more things in the current class. So again, a very big one for the Baylor staff, and that's why recruiting never stops. But at least when August comes around and there's a big dead period, things definitely kind of turn towards football season, which will be exciting as well.
Grayson, obviously the perception surrounding the class has changed over the last month. The rankings have changed. Everything's changed seemingly for the better. But how has the makeup of the class changed in terms of having some new voices as a part of that commitment list? Have new guys kind of blended in with the old and helped to take the reins? Have other new commits kind of grabbed the reins themselves and taken off to try and build this class? How have those dynamics changed with the newer names that have been added?
I don't think a ton has changed. Obviously, Taz Williams and Kamarian Morgan have been very, I think, vocal about trying to add to the class, especially Taz, since he gave his pledge to Baylor. And that's been fun to watch. I think all of these guys have done a good job in one way or another of trying to recruit other guys. And you're kind of seeing that this weekend, right? Where they're trying to, land guys in the 2026 class and get, more guys in the 2025 class. I mean, you're seeing, 11 guys from the class on campus. So you're seeing guys that really want to help build on not just their class, but the future class as well to help the program just continue to build. So that's been really encouraging. I think you're seeing a class that is, very locked in right now, very bought into the future of Baylor and kind of what the vision is under Dave Aranda. And I think that's worked out really, really well for them. And you kind of see it in the results on the recruiting trail, to be honest. And I think that's kind of where things are at right now. I know that, these guys are working on, adding some other guys, whether that means, adding flips or getting guys, who Baylor got in on a little bit later. Those things are definitely happening and might happen this weekend.
Who's the ringleader? Who's the godfather of this class that kind of leads this thing, that might be the one who has the group chat or text or whatever?
The guy who I think has been probably, one of the more vocal leaders, but also a guy who I think is doing a lot of work kind of behind the scenes. And he's also been in the class for a long time, is Shadow Creek wide receiver Ashton Jones. I think he does a great job of building relationships. We saw, with his teammate, the four-star wide receiver Ja'Cory Watson. He committed to Baylor after Ashton did. And I think Ashton's built really good relationships with a lot of the commits in the class. So he's definitely been a big part of it. Like I mentioned, I think Kamarian Morgan definitely deserves a lot of credit. And it's not necessarily just, him, being very vocal or saying a lot of things, but I think his commitment in general spoke volumes. And then, of course, he was able to bring in one of his best friends in Taz Williams to the class. And then, it was a team effort to recruit Michael Turner. So you kind of saw that snowball effect once he committed. So I think he's a part of it as well. But in general, I think this is a really good class full of guys that, again, really want to make Baylor better, and they're doing everything they can to try to accomplish that.
What does this weekend entail for guys who will be visiting that are current commits?
So, I mean, most of it is just kind of getting to learn the program, getting to see more about, kind of what Baylor's about, especially for the 2026 guys. For the 2025 guys, some of it is, for the commits, it's more about just being on campus again and recruiting other guys. But for the 2025 guys who are visiting this weekend, some of them haven't taken an official visit. So this is kind of acting as that. So they're going to have to go through kind of everything, from academics to, where they may be living to just kind of, position coach meeting. I mean, all of those things are going to be really key, I think, for those specific guys. But for the other guys, it's pretty much just being on campus again and just kind of seeing Baylor, trying to get a vibe about Baylor. And I also think the big thing that might happen this weekend, I haven't gotten this confirmed. I don't know, to what level this is going to happen, but I would assume that there will probably be some tour of the new ops facility, which will be, I think, very important. I know a lot of guys have mentioned that and talked about wanting to get on campus for that. I'm curious if they're able to kind of show that off a little bit more on this visit weekend, because I think that would be very, very nice for them and something that they can really show these guys that maybe separates Baylor even more.
Have you been in it at all in the skeleton with the beams going up? Have you been over there?
I have not. I've been on the outside multiple times at camps, and I've seen multiple tours, but I have not been inside it quite yet. I'm hoping to soon, though.
Yeah, and I'm sure you will be, and I'm sure they would want us to be, that during the spring football practice, because it was not really a scrimmage, it was a glorified practice, but it was 7-on-7. I was able to, because I was supposed to go through one of the side doors. Brent Ingram told me to meet him there, but I kept walking, and I then went to the guts underneath what is a major part of that building, and it's massive inside. Now, that's all been changed up, renovated, added, whatever, but it's huge underneath there, and it's something that really was surprising to me, how much space is in an area that you don't maybe really see.
Right. I mean, the tour that they showed on social media, I think it was during the spring, really gave you an idea of what all they're trying to fit in there. And I think that's a big reason why, you mentioned just how massive it is. I mean, they're going to put all the offices in there. They're going to have, a place to eat, a nutrition center, a full weight room. I mean, just kind of all these different things, a recovery room, a locker room. I mean, there's so many things that go into it. So, yeah, I mean, it's a very spacious building and something that is, meant to home, the Baylor football program for a long time. So, yeah, they definitely went all out for it. And I'm excited to see it. I think it's going to be a game changer for Baylor, even though it's not necessarily, what people talk about anymore. Everyone's saying, these don't matter. NIL is all that matters. But you still got to keep up to a certain extent with your facilities. You can't let them completely slide, because then you're giving advantages to other programs when it comes to a nutrition, recovery, strength and conditioning standpoint that can really set you back.
Grayson, we've been doing some articles here and there leading up to the season, and I know one of them was about our biggest question marks, and you were first to post, I think, and so you mentioned the O-line. I think everybody's like, that's everybody's really, but we were able to, have some other answers that added on to that, even though that's clearly the number one. And that remains number one, and that will remain number one until we actually see this team out on the field. But just where do you feel like overall this team is right now? I mean, recruiting's obviously going really well. You got media days behind them. I mean, it's all sights set on fall camp here in the next few days. So how are you feeling with all we've learned over the last few months about where Baylor football is entering 2024?
I continue to feel cautiously optimistic, and it's not really an optimism where I'm saying, oh yeah, Baylor can, win the Big 12 championship or anything like that. I don't have any, expectations for that. But what I do think you're going to see is a much improved football team. And I think at all levels, they've added transfers. They added guys who I think can be very impactful to the program. They went out and got a transfer quarterback that was a hot commodity for a lot of programs in the entire country. I just think in general, you're seeing a program that's changed, whether it's Dave Aranda or the coaching changes that they've made or the personnel changes or what they said at Big 12 Media Days. I think a lot of it points to a new direction for this program, and I think that's a great thing. And after what we saw last year and at the end of the 2022 season, a lot of things had flipped. And I think the luster from what they had in 2021, where you just had all this shine and all this praise after winning Big 12 championship, it kind of wore off. And I think you're at a point now where you can kind of get away from that and start trying to find a new model to start winning football games. I think that's what you're seeing. The changes in the spread offense in particular, I think are very key for Baylor this offseason. Dave Aranda taking over as defense coordinator as well. So I'm feeling, again, cautiously optimistic. I do think this is going to be a bowl team. I think they're going to get 6 wins. The more that I look at the schedule, the more that I look at the roster, I think Baylor definitely has that. And I also think they're good enough to be very competitive in just about every single game on their schedule, which means you're going to have a lot of coin flip games. And it's just going to come down to, which way the ball bounces on any given day. But I do think Baylor far improved from how bad they were a year ago.
We showed a list that was a part of one of the metrics of the fastest players in college football yesterday. DeQuan Finn was like 5 or 6 or so on that list. Garrett brought up that he was surprised that Monteray Baldwin was not a part of the list. Again, this is every college football player based on the sensors that players now wear inside their game day uniforms. Who do you think might be faster? Is it Finn, or do you think Monteray?
Oh, Monteray is definitely faster in a race. I really don't think there's any question about that. But I think it's also important to mention that when you're doing it on the field, it's very different, right? When you're in a game setting, it's different than if you just line up on the track. But if they're on the track, I do think that would be Monteray. But I thought that was really interesting. And I don't think Baylor fans recognize really just how athletic DeQuan Finn is and what he can do in the open field. This guy is an absolute game breaker. And, I mean, you look at his numbers, he's had over 500 yards and I think it's like 7 or 8 touchdowns pretty much every single year on the ground. So you're a given to get that this year from him. That's what he's definitely going to bring to the table. And that's so different than what Baylor has had in past seasons. He's not necessarily the best at designed runs. You're not going to see Baylor just, snapping it to him and him doing a lot of QB power. You might see it some, but not a ton. But where he does thrive is when he gets outside the pocket on pass plays. He makes people miss, and he is, like you said, a sneaky fast, but that sneaky fast really isn't sneaky. He's an absolutely great athlete, and that's going to be on full display, I think, for Baylor fans, and something that I think is going to really, really change how productive they are offensively.
Grayson, thank you very much. Grayson Grundhoefer, Sikkim365.com, lead recruiting analyst, college football analyst as well, with us on Fridays in that late 3 o'clock hour. We kind of carried it over in the 4 o'clock hour, and we appreciate his time. In the next hour, in fact, we'll hear